It is described as a sparkling crystal in the turquoise waters of the Indian Ocean. In 2013, it became Africa's most competitive economy and remains the best environment for doing business in the region. So what has been Mauritius' ingredient for success? This week on Talk Africa, we speak to Mauritius President Ameenah Fakim.
Mauritius may be a small island in the Indian Ocean, but it's one that's achieving big goals. With a population of 1.3 million, the island has a GDP per capita well above $9,000. It's one of Africa's top performing economies and is ranked as the best place to do business in Africa. This June, Mauritius saw its first female president sworn into office. Dr. Ameenah Fakim is a former scientist and has achieved many firsts in her life. And now she's tasked to take her country to even greater heights. In this exclusive interview with CCTV Africa, President Ameenah Fakim spoke to Beatrice Marshall to reveal her vision for Mauritius.
Madam President, thank you. First of all, let me start with your personal victory. You have just been elected President of Mauritius. You said that it was a shock for you. Why was it a shock, and are you still shocked?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for taking time to actually do the interview of the President of Mauritius, and of course giving Mauritius this exposure. Coming to the election, yes, I was quite shocked, and now getting over it. Why I was shocked is because the party was up against two of the most powerful parties in this country. So it was already a question of David against Goliath. We were shocked also because while going through the process, we noticed that this small party, which of course had proposed me as president, had a very organized election. And they won it because they did not want to change the constitution, which the other party was proposing. And people recognize themselves in the present system as it stands, and of course in the way the constitution has been providing for representativity and everything. So it was, I think, a mixture of all this that made it that the party that proposed my name won the election, and as you know, they won with a landslide as well.
What does it mean for you, though, personally, to be President of Mauritius?
Well, there's two kind of views to this. Personally, of course, it's very important. It's very important for myself, for my family, for me to be given the opportunity to serve my country at the very, very high level. And for a woman, it's very important because we're talking about really breaking the glass ceiling. And to the young girl who is doing the sciences, who is out there and has a role model. And I think this is where it's more important than anything else to have this role model for women to say, yes, we can do it.
You are talking about it's good to have a role model for women, and you have also mentioned that you're going to tell people, yes, it is possible as a woman. Of course, in Africa, we have seen two other female presidents there, Liberia's Ellen Johnson Sirleaf and former president of Malawi, Joyce Banda. So why is it important for you to still tell people as a woman, yes, we can do it?
Well, you've already mentioned 3 out of 54 countries, so the ratio is already very, very poor. So we need to have more women at decision-making level, be it at the level of the presidency, be it as prime ministers, be it at board levels, because as you know, women, when they are in these fora, they bring a new dimension to decision-making. And that's why it is so important to have as many women representing their country. Now, if you look at the African landscape, we find that in spite of South Africa's difficult history, they still managed to adhere to the SADC percentage of 30. And if you look at a country like Rwanda, they're doing exceedingly well. They have over 50% female representation in the parliament. And I've been to Rwanda and I've seen the country. It's a vibrant country coming outside, just outside the genocide in 1994, and it's a country which is doing extremely well. So maybe there is the contribution of the women there to make the country the way it is now. So it is very, very important to have women representation in all walks of decision-making processes.
You are a renowned biologist, though, and now you're president. How did you make the switch to politics? What drew you to politics?
Well, I must say that I didn't choose politics, and politics chose me. And why did I get chosen? I got chosen because I was fairly neutral politically, because the position of the president here, one has to be neutral, because this is again provided for in the Constitution. I was chosen maybe because I was a woman, and also I was chosen because I happen to belong to the Muslim community, because Mauritius has a diversity of people living in this country, which makes our strength, by the way, because diversity, unity in diversity is a very important slogan for any country, and Africa in particular. So I think I had all these plus points which were going for me. And I think this is one of the reasons why I think I was also accepted by the people, because when they voted for a package with myself being a president. And I think it's also the first time in this country where the name of the president was mentioned before, or rather during the electoral campaign, which is not usually the case. So this is also a very important signal which was sent out to the public upfront.
Well, you have mentioned a very interesting aspect there of Mauritius' racial integration, and that is one issue that a lot of African countries are still struggling with, you know, overcoming the ethnicities in their own countries. What is it that can be learned from the Mauritian situation?
You know, Mauritius, over the years, politicians have increasingly talked about our rainbow nation. So that's already a good slogan. But me personally, I don't really like the notion of a rainbow nation, because it means that the colors are next to each other. I would really like to see a melting pot. And this melting pot, if we achieve this kind of mixing of all the people, we would be coming out very strong. Still, we still have a few good lessons to actually show the world in terms, as you have mentioned, this racial harmony, because I personally feel that one should not be using this difference to divide. One can use this difference to integrate and unite. Me personally, I've grown up in a very multiracial village where we had Muslim, Hindus, Christians, all living together peacefully and, of course, in complete harmony. And as a child and as a younger person, when I was going abroad, I realized how important this racial harmony was important, because one comes out enriched, be it intellectually and, of course, socially. And this is a message that we grow up with, and this is a message that we pass on to our children. So for me, unity in diversity is a very, very important point, and this is something that we can share with the world. But Mauritius has also had an advantage that we have had free education from very start, and this free education has helped precisely to maintain this racial harmony. And of course, the free education has been at the basis of our economic success.
I want to look at your role as president now and your focus. What is your focus going to be?
You know, my role as president is already kind of mentioned, and of course, in the constitution of the country. And as you know, it has a ceremonial role, but one has the responsibility, the presidency has the responsibility to look into the way institutions are functioning and to be the guarantee and the guardian of the constitution as well. It's a very, very important role, and what I feel that in spite of this role, which of course mentioned in the Constitution, there is enough space for the presidency, for the president to be doing other things. And for me, the key factor for social cohesion, social unity, social stability rests with the economy. And when there is economic progression, when of course the economy is growing, there is, of course, opportunities for everyone. It's very key to reducing poverty. And for me, I think the presidency has a key role to play to look at the various economic pillars, which will make, of course, which will fire the Mauritian economy. And the president has a role to play in as much as he or she, in this case she, will be able to see to it that new pillars emerge, new pillars which capitalize on the talent of the Mauritian people, the diversity of the Mauritian people. And as you know, we don't have much resources. So our human capital remains key in terms of furthering the economic agenda. So the President has a key role to play in furthering, in advancing, of course, and of course promoting these new economic pillars, which will of course make the Mauritian economy stronger and of course more diversified.
You talk about the pillars that you want to promote. What are those pillars exactly?
Well, coming from a scientific background, I would really like to see science becoming a very important pillar. And this is where we have to really look at the STEM in terms of capacity building. Because you have science, technology, engineering, and mathematics being promoted in our schools, we will have, of course, a very strong and robust talent-based on which, of course, the economy can, of course, fire on more strongly. And we need to build our capacity. We need to leverage the diaspora. And, of course, we need to leverage all our economic and partners, be it in the region and, of course, internationally as well.
You have been in office now for about 80 days, though. Do you see, though, that the responsibilities that you're going to have, do they exceed your expectations, or are they at par with your expectations?
I think the responsibility can be from both sides. It can be from my side. I see that they can meet my expectation, but I will not be able to gauge the expectation from the public. And I think there it is quite overwhelming. What is it you think the public will expect from you? Well, I think they expect a much bigger presence of the President. They expect economically, they expect the President to be able to perform more, but of course I'm limited within what the Constitution provides for in terms of attribution. But I think the population expects perhaps a bit more. But you know, the expectation globally will be what for anybody will be, of course, to have enough money in the bank, a job to go to, stability and peace in the country. And I think the President's role must be able to leverage into all these expectations. You yourself, you're one of several firsts. I mean, being the first woman president in Mauritius is just one of them. You have also been the first female professor at the University of Mauritius, the first female dean of the Faculty of Science. Gender equality has been high on your agenda, but you have also previously mentioned that the girl child especially, I mean, the salaries of the girl child do not meet with the expectations of education or vice versa. What do you think needs to be done? Fortunately, you know, for Mauritius, we haven't had that much difference in terms of pay, for example. I'll just take one example of wages. Most areas of, well, in terms of administration, there is equal pay for equal gender. That's not the issue. The issue is, again, it's not an issue really, because we have had educations free from 1976, and before it was a question of a choice for families to educate boys or to educate girls. But once, of course, education was free, then, of course, everybody went to school. So everybody has had education. So we are looking really now at what I increasingly call the leaky pipe syndrome. We have girls performing very well from primary, pre-primary, primary, secondary, even tertiary level. So, but what we see coming out of the pipe is very few women. So that's why what I say that we need to increasingly look at ways of plugging this leaky pipe. Now, how do you plug it? Is precisely to have more women at decision-making process, more women as CEO, more women in both the public and the private sectors. And the issue as well is to try and see what makes women stay at middle management level and not go up. And I think, again, there is a paradigm shift happening in this country, is that increasing at the family level, both the wife and the husband are aware now of the joint responsibilities, because at some point it was a generational issue where all the responsibilities were for the woman. So the woman had to look after the family. There was a lot of pressure socially for women, of course, to succeed, well, both academically and, of course, at the family. And there was also this notion that when the family goes wrong, it's always the woman's fault. And if you put that, this kind of stigma attached to the girl, then of course necessarily they will tend to kind of retract and stay behind. But I think this is, again, this kind of glass ceiling is also being broken, and women are emerging more and more. So we see a net progression. However, the danger is when we look at the science, the scientific area, this is where we find there is, of course, a paucity of girl talent. Because there is a tendency to actually say to the girl from a very young age that she can't do the science, that she can't do the hard science. This was the case for me. When I actually went for science guidance, I was told that I should not go in the sciences because I was a woman. And this is again a mindset that has to change, and this is where I think making the gender sensitivity increase at the level of the teaching of sciences becomes very important from a very young age. And this is true for Mauritius, this is true for the region, this is particularly true for Africa.
We're going to take a short break here on the program, but when we return, we will continue our discussion with Mauritius President Ameenah Fakim. Stay with us. Welcome back to Talk Africa. Now, before we continue our discussions with Mauritius President Ameenah Fakim, we took to the streets of Port Louis to find out the ordinary citizens' expectations and aspirations for the future.
My wish and my dream to see Mauritius, especially Port Louis, improved for the future generation.
My dream is that Africa will be one of the greatest continents in 10 years. No more, 10 years I think.
I would like that in the years to come we should be in a higher standard of living, less poverty, we get more concern about our environment, we have a better education for the youngs, and we are struggling to have a better system. So these are my dreams for my country.
I love Africa. Africa is a great continent. I want Africa to be competitive, as good as any nation in the world.
We Chinese in Mauritius, we can play a good role into Africa. I think we can play a very big role as a, I would say that, an intermediate between China and Africa.
All right, I want to look at your tourism sector here, though, because it's one of the main backbones of your economy here. But you're now, of course, facing challenges from the Seychelles and the Maldives, and you're looking towards China to get more tourists, so to speak. What are the advantages, though, for Mauritius? And on that note as well, China is also now investing massively in Africa. What would be the unique advantage here in Mauritius?
You've mentioned two countries. You mentioned Maldives, you mentioned Seychelles, and you've also mentioned Mauritius. The first commonality we have is that we have sun and sea. But the advantage that we have is that we have a very diversified population, as I've mentioned. Mauritius is a microcosm of the world. We have people from African descent, Chinese descent, Indian descent, European descent. And I think this is what makes Mauritius unique. And I think if we want to promote the tourism sector, we can no longer stick to the sun and sea model. We have to go beyond. And this is where, again, where green tourism comes into the fore. We also have cultural tourism, which we can put forward, because we also have many of our brothers and sisters, of course, who actually are from China, and of course they represent the last wave of immigration in this country. We have a unique environment, we have a unique biodiversity, we're surrounded by ocean, and these to me are our strength. And this is what we should leverage into to make a different brand of tourism. And you also mentioned the exchange with China. You know, China has been a very, very important partner for Mauritius. We've established full diplomatic relationships since 1972. But over and above this, as I said, culturally, we have had a lot of cultural exchanges with the country because of our diaspora. But over and above this, China has been a very important player for us economically, financially. And China has partnered with us on many infrastructure projects. We've benefited a lot from grants and interest-free loan, of course also commercial loans. So China has been a very, very important partner for the development of Mauritius. But I think what we offer China now is our positioning in the Indian Ocean. What we also offer other countries as well is the fact that they can go into Africa, they can go through Mauritius to other parts of the world, because being small, we have had to be very agile in terms of our decision making, in terms of formulating policies, in terms of also promoting intra-Africa trade, which we also would like to see, because there is a very big captive market of 1.2 billion people out there. And Mauritius also belongs to quite a few economic blocs in the region. So our policy is to really ensure that there is, of course, full meshing with these economic blocs. So all these are very good advantages, and we're also very, very careful. We listen very much to what China has to say, and we are fully committed to FOCAC as well.
You're talking about your country's economic growth here, though, and one of the other issues that Mauritius wants to do is to raise its economy to high income status by 2020. But of course, there are bound to be hurdles there. What do you see as the hurdles here?
As I said, well, hurdles, of course. Mauritius is a small economy. We depend, of course, a great deal on what's happening out there internationally, and we've had the tail end of the financial crisis, but not so much in terms of our banks, because our banks are fully regulated. The tail end, because when people do not have the same economic power, they can't travel, so this impacts our tourism sector. So there are a few kind of sequelae to the financial crisis. But what we would like to see, as I said, Mauritius' ambitions to have a better per capita income, of course, a better GDP by a set time. This would be, of course, a very important consideration. So what we'll have to see is we have to be, as I said, very agile in terms of our decision-making processes, and we have to be very quick in going in this kind of process, to be very rapid in terms of decision-making processes. What we have had experience as well is brain drain. I think this is also affecting most of the African continent. But what the government has done now, they have enacted policy in the last budget to bring in the diaspora. For example, Mauritian diaspora who wants to come back to Mauritius, they will have a tax holiday for 10 years. So this is an incentive. But over and above this, what we have to do here is, when we want to attract high quality diaspora, we'll have to provide the same, almost the same infrastructure that these people are operating abroad, so that by coming back here, they will have the opportunity to operate in the same conditions and of course help advance the agenda of the country. Now, there are niches where the private sector is very active, and one of these, for example, we have set up, and of course it was my past life when I was an entrepreneur, is set up the very first biopark in Mauritius. Now, the biopark is coming up with the necessary infrastructure to attract some of the highly qualified diaspora to come back here. Now, what does the biopark do? And within the biopark is operating one center, for example, to do a high quality clinical trial, and also look into ways of enhancing research and development in two key areas, which is our biodiversity, both terrestrial and of course oceanic. So these are niche areas which of course will also help add plus point to our economic growth.
Mauritius also says it is a bridge, though, between Asia and Africa. In terms of Africa itself, though, what role does Mauritius see itself playing as a bridge between Asia and Africa?
Well, by virtue of our positioning, and if you look at the way that the government wants to develop, for example, the port, we want to be, of course, a key player in terms of maritime traffic. We also want to be a key player in terms of air access and air traffic as well, because if you look at our positioning, there can be, of course, we can act as this bridge. But over and above this, as I said, we can leverage our human capital in terms of many sectors of activities. Our ocean will remain our strength, because the Indian Ocean is not well known in terms of its resources. We do have an idea of what we have, but I think this is where strategically we also have to look at towards the ocean economy as being one of the key players to again add plus point to our economy.
Mauritius, though, has become now one of Africa's most advanced economies, having overtaken South Africa, I believe, in 2013. What's been the key ingredient here for your success?
The key ingredient, I would say, first of all, education, is to capitalize, to actually get a good educated. If you look at the way Mauritian economy has progressed, Immediately after independence, the economy depended up to 90% on one monocrop, which is sugar. And it has advanced fairly rapidly because the economy has been diversified. And now, as we speak, agriculture contributes almost, I think, about 5%. So there has been massive diversification. So education has largely contributed to this. The other issue is governance. It is so important to have, change of government. Every 5 years, the Constitution provides for this. So governance has been a very important issue. We're also doing massively in terms of combating corruption. Fraud and corruption is also very key in the fight, because if you have a transparent, everything become, the decision-making processes, everything is transparent. I mean, these are very, very key factors which have helped the economy progress. But I think over and above this, we have seen, I think we would like to see more of this in terms of good private partnership, public-private partnership, which of course key in ensuring that the government acts as a facilitator, and of course the private sector comes in with investment. And these important points have been, of course, some of the key ingredients which have made Mauritius becoming what it is as we know it today.
You have talked about the importance of changing government or changing governance every 5 years, though. How do you envision now the future of Mauritius over the next 5 years?
I would like to see it, Mauritius overall, to look at the global picture, is to see Mauritius as an intelligent island. Move away from the classical representation of tourist destination. Mauritius people, the people of Mauritius can think, they can take decisions, they can do things. We want to be perceived as a nation of doers, a nation of entrepreneurs, a nation that can capitalize on existing resources and create out of it, to be creative. And so this is, again, a whole game changer in terms of looking at the Mauritian people.
I just want to get a final comment from you, though, regarding your election as president here. Do you think it will have an impact on the wider region, being the first female president of Mauritius?
As I've said, it's very important in terms of messaging, in terms of role modeling, and we must again give this message to the young girls who are out there that it can happen. But the more important, I think, game changer in this process has been to get a non-political president who is also a scientist. I mean, this is already something which is very, very strong, because so far all the presidents in this country, they have come from major political parties. I'm the only one to have been chosen because of my non-political past, but more importantly to send the message also that science is important, science can make a difference, because again this is a message which is not well reached in many countries, and those countries that have understood that science is important, presence of women is important, these countries have made mileage out of it. So again, I think this is perhaps some of the most important messages that this presidency can send to the world.
Thank you very much for your time. And that's all we have on Talk Africa this week. You can join this conversation on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. For me, Beatrice Marshall in Mauritius. Goodbye.